Very good morning to all of you, my friends. Welcome back. I hope you guys have solved all the questions of practice manual and study material of chapter overheads and activity-based costing. I hope you guys are thorough with the concepts. So we are done with overheads and activity-based costing. Let's proceed further with the remaining part of the syllabus. I was not being able to take lecture on 16 due to connectivity issues. So I'll request ICAI to keep the lecture somewhere once we finish the syllabus. So let's proceed further with the next phase of the syllabus, wherein we'll be discussing methods of costing. So let's start with a new chapter, that is process costing. This is a part of method of costing. Now, what is process costing? Now, this process costing is used by those companies or those manufacturing concern wherein the raw material, their input has to pass through two or more than two processes before being converted into final product. I repeat again, this process costing is a method of costing used by those companies or manufacturing concern wherein their raw material has to pass through various processes before being converted into final product. Let me write this part. So what is process costing? This method of costing is used by those manufacturing concern wherein the raw material or we can say input has to pass through two or more than two processes before being converted into final product. I repeat again for the students who have joined a bit late. So this process costing is a method of costing used by those companies or manufacturing concern wherein the raw material or input has to pass through two or more than two processes before being converted into final product. So let's say how this mechanism works, wherein I have raw material. Let's say it is introduced in process first, raw material or we can say inputs. It is put into process first. Now, once the process first is completed, the output of the process first is transferred to the next process. Again, the output of the process first will be the input of process second. Now, once process second is completed, let's say there is one more process wherein process third. Again, the output of process second will be the input for process third. And let's say this is the last process, and from process third will get the final product. So this is how this mechanism works, wherein the input is introduced in process first. Thereafter, the output of process first is transferred to process second. output of process second is transferred to process third, and the final product what we get from final product जो हमें process third से मिलता है. So this is the way how this mechanism works. So this process costing is used by, this is the method of costing used by those manufacturing concern wherein their raw material has to pass through various processes before being converted into final product. I request you guys to please copy this explanation. Let me discuss this concept with the help of a practical situation wherein let's say I'm the manufacturer of potato chips. Now I do procure these potatoes directly from farmer. So my final output is what? My final output is potato chips. I do procure potatoes directly from farmer. So my input will be what? Potatoes. Very good morning, Nisha. Very good morning, Anmol. Very good morning, Neha. Very good morning, Sushil. So I do manufacture potato chips from potatoes. Now, I do procure these potatoes directly from farmer. Now, there are various processes involved in manufacturing potato chips from potatoes. Let's say my inputs or my raw material are introduced in process first. We can say, let's say the process first is sorting and grading of potatoes. This is my first process, that is sorting and grading of potatoes. Now, after sorting and grading, we do prepare potato chips from potatoes. So let's say the output of process first is transferred to the next process. That is what? Preparation of potato chips from once this process gets over, let's say the next process starts wherein we do add some sort of preservatives and flavor to improve the taste. So let's say the output of process second, that is after preparation of potato chips, it is transferred to the next process wherein we do add flavors and preservatives. Now let's say there is one more process wherein we do the packing and finishing job. So this is the last process. After packing and finishing, my final product, that is potato chips, are ready. So this is how this mechanism works, wherein I do manufacture potato chips from potatoes. The first process, that is sorting and grading of potatoes, the output of the process first is transferred to the next process, wherein after sorting and grading, we do prepare potato chips from potatoes. Now this process gets over and the output of this process is transferred to the next process wherein we do add flavor and preservatives. Now the output of this process is transferred to the next process where we do the packing and finishing part. And from this we get the final output. We can say the final product is potato chips. So herein what we can see is that the raw material, that is my potatoes, has to pass through various processes before being converted into final product, that is my potato chips. Now here, since each and every process is unique and separate, since each and every process is unique, and separate set of costs are incurred for every process, so therefore what we will do, for each and every process we will prepare a separate process account. I repeat again guys, since each process is unique and separate set of costs are incurred for every process, therefore what we will do, for every process we will prepare a separate process account to record the costs that are pertaining to that process. So, since each process is unique and separate set of costs are incurred in every process, therefore separate process account is to be prepared for every process to record the costs pertaining to that process. So सीधी और आसान भाषा में हर एक प्रोसेस यूनिक होता है, डिफरेंट होता है. सो हर प्रोसेस के लिए हम लोग सेपरेट प्रोसेस अकाउंट बनाएंगे टू रिकॉर्ड द कॉस्ट दैट आर पर्टेनिंग टू दैट प्रोसेस. If you guys have any doubts or queries, you guys can please post your query. Further, I request you guys to please copy this explanation. Good morning, Miss Pratna Sarthi, Ajay Chauhan, Miss Sai Divya. Good morning, Shweta. जी नेहा, हर प्रोसेस की कॉस्ट सेपरेटली एस्टिमेट होगी एंड सेपरेट प्रोसेस अकाउंट विल बी प्रिपेयर्ड फॉर एवरी प्रोसेस. गुड मॉर्निंग तरुण. आई एम गुड श्वेता. गुड मॉर्निंग साक्षी. Now, we have learned that what is process costing, and since each process is unique, so separate process accounts is to be prepared for every process. Now the point is how to prepare process account. What's the format of process account? So let's start, guys. When talking about the basic process account, it's very simple, where in particulars, units, amount. Particulars, units, and amount. We will introduce raw material in process first, so we can call it as inputs or raw material. In units and in amount. Let's say 10,000 units are introduced at the rate ₹2. So 10,000 and 20,000, that is 10,000 into 2, 20,000. Further, we'll account the additional costs that are incurred, that is labor, direct expenses, other expenses. Now, after incurring all these costs, we'll get the final output and it is transferred to next process, that is process second. Again, I'm discussing the very basic format of process account. So we'll get the output in units and the output is transferred to the next process, that is process second. That is, we can say the output of process first. Thereafter, we'll prepare process second account. And let's say there are only two processes involved. So the output of process second will be the final output. Now, very important, guys, the output of process first will be the input of process second. I repeat again, the output of process first is transferred to the next process. So this will be the input of process second. So we'll write to process first. If any additional material is introduced, or we can say consumable stores, we'll write it here. Further, the other costs that are incurred, let's say labor, other expenses. We'll get the total cost and the output of process second is transferred to the finished product account, assuming there are only two processes. So by finished stock. So this is how the basic process account is prepared. For the students who have a rough idea about normal loss, abnormal gain, or no abnormal loss, I'll be discussing this part separately. But when talking about the basic process account, this is how the basic process account is prepared, wherein whatever the costs that are relating to a particular process will be accounted on the debit side, and on the credit side will write the output of the process, And further, when talking about the output of the process, it will be input. It will be the input of the next process. And let's say there are only two processes involved. So the output of process second will be transferred to finished stock account. If you guys have any doubts in this part, you guys can please post your query. Those who want to copy this format, you guys can please copy. I have provided the notes also for your reference. So just let me look over what I have provided. So herein, I have provided some material on process costing also. So herein the meaning of process costing is a method of costing used in industries wherein the raw material has to pass through two or more than two processes before being converted into final product. A separate process account for each process is open and all the expenditures pertaining to a process is charged to that process account. So this is the meaning of process costing. Now, herein what we can see is that the input or raw material is produced in process first, and the output of process first is transferred to the next process. Again, from output of process second, we are getting finished goods. So this is how this mechanism works. Further, when talking about the basic format to material input, to labor, to other expenses, I'll be discussing this abnormal gain, abnormal loss, and normal loss separately. However, what I've discussed till now is that the output of process first will be transferred to the next process, and it will be the input of process second. So we have written to process first, again, all the expenditures, and we are getting the final output. So this is what we have discussed till now. If you guys have any doubts, you guys can please post your queries. Now, let me give you a brief summary about what all we'll be discussing in this chapter, wherein when talking about the meaning of process costing, I've already discussed. Thereafter, we'll discuss process loss and gain, that is normal loss, abnormal gain. Thereafter, we'll discuss how to value work in progress, that is the concept of equivalent production. And the last part, that is inter-process profit. I'll be discussing these points one by one. So let's start, guys. Now we have discussed the basic concept that how to prepare process account. So let's discuss one question. The question is there in the study material also. So let's discuss one question on process costing. The very basic question. It is there in the study material also. So let's start with illustration number 1. I request you guys to please open your study material. I'll be starting with illustration number 1. I'll be discussing this part separately, Shweta. Let me complete the very basic question. So illustration number 1 of study material I'm discussing. It's page number 10.4. Now from the following data, prepare process account indicating the cost of each process and the total cost. The total unit that passed through each process were 240 for the period. Further, the details are given as related to process first, process second, and process third, material, labor, and other expenses. Indirect expenses amounting to rupees 85,000 may be apportioned on the basis of wages, and there is no opening and closing stock. So herein, 240 is the input and 240 is the output. So we can skip this column, that is units column. This units column is to be prepared only when in a particular question, if the information is given as regards normal loss or abnormal loss. So herein, the original input, that is the raw material, is of 240 units, and the final output, what we are getting, is also 240 units. So we can skip somehow this units column. So let's start, guys, with illustration number 1. Herein, the question is asking us to calculate the cost of each process and the total cost. So that's why we can prepare a per unit price column and total amount column. It's up to you. You can prepare the total amount column also further, but it is advisable that the cost, the question is asking us to calculate the cost of each process. It means what they are costing. They are saying that you have to calculate the cost per unit of each process. So let's start with illustration number 1, that is process account. Process first account. Page is page number 10.4. Since the input and output is same, so units column बनाने की जरूरत नहीं है. क्वेश्चन में प्रोसेस का कॉस्ट पूछा है और टोटल कॉस्ट पूछा है, इसलिए हम लोग पर यूनिट का कॉलम बना रहे हैं. You can skip this column. It's up to you. So let's start. Herein, when talking about process first, material cost, labor cost, and other expenses are given. So to material, to labor, to other expenses. Material, it is 1,50,000. Labor, it is 80,000. And other expenses are 26,000. The input is of 240 units. So we can easily calculate the per unit cost. So 1,50,000 divided by 240 will get 625. Similarly, 80,000 divided by 240 will get 333.333. We can write it either 333.333 or 334. It's up to you. Further, 26,000 divided by 240 units. So it is 108.333. It's up to you. You can take it either 108 or 109. It's up to you. So here we have taken 334. So we'll take here 108. Now some information is given in the question as regards indirect expenses. Herein, when talking about the indirect expenses, they are 85,000. And it is to be distributed among process first and second and third in the ratio of direct wages. So when talking about direct wages, the ratio is 8 is to 20 is to 6. So this will be 20,000. This will be 50,000. This will be 15,000. So indirect expenses, it's 20,000 for process first. Per unit will be 83. So these are the total costs that are associated to this process. So these are the costs that are associated to this process. So we can calculate the total cost, that is 1,50,000 plus 80,000 plus 26,000 plus 20,000. We'll get 2,76,000. And total per unit cost will be 1,150. Now the output of process first is transferred to process second. So by process second, 1,150 and 2,76,000. So this is how the basic process account will be prepared. Now we'll prepare process second account. So we'll first write the inputs of process second. That will be what? The output of process first. So 2 process first, 1,150 and 2,76,000. Thereafter, we'll write down all the cost of that process. So 2 material, 2 labor, 2 other expenses, and 2 all the indirect expenses. The information is given in the question as regards all these expenses. That is 50,000, 2 lakh and 72. So 50,000, 2 lakh, 72,000 and then 50,000, that is my indirect expense. We'll transfer the output to the next processes since there are total 3 processes. So 50,000 divided by 240. 208.33. $834, we can write it 834. This will be 300. This will be 20. Total cost will be 276 plus 50 plus 2 lakh plus 72 plus 50. So this will be 6,48,000. This will be 2,700. Now the last process, that is process third account. Again, in the same way, we'll prepare process third account. Per unit and amount. The output of process second will be transferred to process third. So this will be the input of process third. That is 2 process second, 2,700 and 6,48,000. Further, we'll write all the cost. That is material, labor, other expenses, and indirect expenses. Further, material is 20, 60, and 25. So material is 20, labor is 60, this is 25, and this is 15,000. So this will be 83. This will be 250. This will be 104.2. $62.5. This is how we'll get the total cost. And the output of process third is transferred to finished stock account. So buy finished stock. 3,200 and 7,68,000. So this is how this process account will be prepared. If in question no information is given as regards normal loss, abnormal loss, or abnormal gain. If you guys have any doubts in this part, you guys can please post your queries. Waiting for your queries, giving you 2 minutes time. If you guys have any conceptual queries, that is what is process costing, how to prepare the basic process account, you guys can please post, giving you 2 minutes time. Those who want to copy the explanation can please copy. The solution is given in the study material. So giving you 2 minutes time. Good morning, Mamta. I think you have joined a bit late. So we are done with the basic question of process costing, wherein we learned how to prepare the basic process account if no information is given in the question as regards normal loss or abnormal gain. So let's proceed further with the next part, that is normal loss. Now, what is normal loss? Now, due to the nature of the product or production process, the loss that is bound to happen is what we call as normal loss. What is normal loss? Due to the nature of product or production loss, production process, कुछ loss होते ही हैं, we can't avoid it. That is what we call as normal loss. So what is normal loss? Due to the nature of product or production process, the loss that is bound to happen is normal. When talking about this word bound to happen, it means what? This normal loss cannot be avoided. So this is what we can say, that it is this normal loss is unavoidable. So due to the nature of the product or production process, कुछ losses जो होते हैं वो होने ही है. We can't avoid it. That is what we call as normal loss. These losses can be predicted well in advance by the management because of the past experience or past data. So can be predicted by management in advance. So what is normal loss? The loss that is bound to happen. ये loss हम लोग avoid नहीं कर सकते. This is normal loss. 1 second. So the loss that is bound to happen, we can't avoid it, is normal loss. It is due to the nature of product or production process. Let me discuss this concept with the help of an example. The same example that I do manufacture potato chips from potatoes. Now I procure these potatoes directly from farmer. अब होता क्या है कि from farm to my factory premise, potatoes जो है कई बार लोड होते हैं, कई बार अनलोड होते हैं. Due to this unloading and unloading, कुछ potatoes खराब हो जाते हैं. I can't avoid it. So this loss of potatoes because of what loading or unloading is what we call as normal loss. I repeat again, when talking about potatoes, कुछ potatoes खराब होते ही है क्योंकि farm से मेरी factory तक आते हैं. I can't avoid it. Loading और unloading के time कुछ potatoes खराब होने ही है. I can't avoid it. So the loss of these potatoes is what we call as normal loss. Another example, let's say I am into business of processing crude oil. I'm into business of processing crude oil. I do process crude oil and I'll get petrol, diesel, gasoline or natural gas. Now during the process of refining the crude oil or processing the crude oil, certain percentage of the oil is evaporated. Again, मैं उसे avoid कर ही नहीं सकता. I can't avoid it because it is the nature of the product that कुछ percent जो है product evaporate होगा ही. So that the percentage of product that is evaporated is what we call as normal loss. Another example, let's say I am the manufacturer of wooden furniture. Now while manufacturing furniture, कुछ percent wood जो है वो scrap होता ही है. Again, I can't avoid it because it is the nature of the product or production process कि कुछ wood खराब होना ही है. I can't avoid it. So that is what the wood that is scrapped is what we call as normal. If you guys have any doubts in this part, you guys can please post your query. When talking about normal loss, it is unavoidable because product का nature ऐसा है या production process ऐसा है कि वो loss हम लोग avoid कर ही नहीं सकते. That is what we call as normal loss. It is estimated by management well in advance. Now, when talking about the treatment of normal loss, when talking about the treatment of normal loss, the cost, sorry, when talking about the treatment of normal loss, the cost of normal loss or the value of abnormal loss is absorbed by good units. When talking about the treatment of normal loss, the value or we can say cost of normal loss is absorbed by good units. Further, if any scrap value is realized, जो लकड़ी खराब हो गई है, स्क्रैप हो गई है, उसे हमने मार्केट में एकदम सस्ती रेट पे बेच दिया. We sold these scrapped in the market and we are getting something in return. So the amount realized on sale of scrap, the amount realized on sale of scrap of normal loss will be deducted from the process cost to calculate the cost of product. So let's summarize it. When talking about normal loss, again due to the nature of product or production process, ये loss हम लोग avoid नहीं कर सकते. That is normal. When talking about the example, certain potatoes are damaged due to loading or unloading while transporting these potatoes. So the damaged potatoes or the spoiled potatoes are, we call it as normal loss. Another example, let's say I'm the manufacturer of shirt. Now during the course of manufacturing a shirt, कुछ percent fabric खराब होता ही है. I can't avoid it. It is normal loss. Another example, let's say I'm into refining crude oil. I do process crude oil, and during the process of refining or processing, certain percentage of crude oil is evaporated. I can't avoid it. That is normal loss. When talking about the treatment of normal loss, the value of normal loss is absorbed by good units. The value of normal loss is absorbed by good units. Any amount realized on sale of scrap of normal loss will be deducted from the process cost to calculate the cost of product. If you guys have any doubts in this part, you guys can please post your query. Further, I request you guys to please copy the explanation. Any doubts, Shweta? Any doubts, Mamta? Any doubts, Tarun? Waiting for your queries. If you guys have any queries, I hope, Shweta, your query is resolved. Okay, you are asking about normal gain or abnormal gain. Anyway, Shweta, I'll be addressing your query in abnormal gain. Anyone else having any doubts? I request you guys to please copy this explanation. let me discuss further this concept of normal loss with the help of an example, the treatment of normal loss with the help of an example. Let's say the total process cost is 1,80,000. Further, I have made an input of 10,000 units and the output also I am getting is 10,000 units. There is no normal loss. Input and output is 10,000 units. I have made an input of 10,000 units and from a particular process, I'm getting the output of 10,000 units only. So herein it's very easy for us to calculate the cost, wherein when talking about the calculation of cost per unit, it's very easy for us to calculate the cost. We can calculate it directly that 1,80,000 is the process cost and the input and output is same, that is 10,000 units. So we'll get the cost per unit. This will be 18 rupees. Now let's take one more situation. Let's take one more situation wherein I have made an input of 10,000 units. And in question, it is given that the normal loss is at the rate 10% of inputs. The normal loss is 10% of input. It means what? The normal loss will be how much? 1,000 units. So how much will be my output? 9,000 units. I repeat again, guys. Yes, Gunjan, I'll be discussing this part also. Don't worry. So herein, I have made an input of 10,000 units. There is a normal loss that is given in the question, that is 10% of input. It means what? My output will be how much? 9,000 units. Now, when talking about calculating the cost per unit, see, my total cost is 1,80,000. However, my output is how much? 9,000 units. That is 10,000 minus 1,000. That is 9,000 units. So the cost per unit will be what? Rupees 20. It means what? In simple terms, जो 1,000 units का cost है, जो 1,000 units का cost है, जो 1,000 units का cost है, वो कौन bear कर रहा है? The remaining 9,000 units. It means what? The cost will be inflated due to normal loss. So I repeat again, earlier when the input and output was same, the cost was 18 rupees per unit. But in the second question, there is a normal loss of 1,000 units and we are getting only 9,000 units as output. It means what? The cost per unit will be inflated because the value of abnormal loss is absorbed by good units. जो 1,000 units का normal loss जो आ रहा है, उसका जो cost है या value है, वो कौन absorb करेगा? Remaining 9,000 units will absorb the cost of these 1,000 units. So that's why the product cost will be inflated. So this is the second situation. Now let's take one more situation. Let's take one more situation wherein, let's say, normal loss units are scrapped at the rate rupees 4.5 per unit. Let's take the third situation in which if in case the normal loss units are scrapped in the market, or we can say scrap value is given, that is rupees 4.5 per unit. Now the point is how to calculate the cost. Nothing to worry, guys. How much is my total cost? 1,80,000. Now 1,80,000 is my cost. Now there is normal loss of 1,000 units. These 1,000 units can be sold in the market at a very nominal price, that is 4.5 per unit. So what it means, it is a profit to us. So what we will do, we will reduce it from the cost. So these 1,000 units into 4.5, that is 4,500. divided by my 10,000 units is the input minus 1,000, that is my normal loss. So we can easily calculate the cost per unit, that is 1,80,000 minus 4,500 divided by 9,000. So we'll get 19.5. So in short, अगर कुछ scrap value realize होती है on sale of normal loss, it will be reduced from the process cost. अब हमारा net cost कितना लग रहा है? 1,80,000 minus we are getting something from market, that is 4,500. So our net cost of the process is 1,75,500. That is 180 minus 4,500. So this is the concept. Again, there are no formulas in process costing. You have to follow the basic I mean, it's more of a logic kind of thing. So there are no formulas. कोई भी formula याद करने की जरूरत नहीं. It's just a common sense कि भाई 1,80,000 is the cost of this. We are getting 4,500 back from the market. So how much is my net cost? 175,500. And my final output is how much? 9,000 units. So we can easily calculate the cost per unit. So this is what the concept of normal loss. So herein what we can see, there is a formula that is given in the study material to calculate the cost per unit, wherein the process cost minus scrap value realized on sale of normal loss units divided by my input minus normal loss. Input in units, normal loss in units. So this is how we'll get the cost per unit. That is process cost minus scrap value realized on sale of normal loss units divided by input minus normal loss. This input minus normal loss is what we can say my expected production. This input minus normal loss is what we can say that it is my expected production. If you guys have any doubts in this part, in this concept of normal loss, you guys can please post your query. Yashwata, Mamta, Gunjan, Mr. Krishna, Sushil Kumar, Sankaran, Tarun, any doubts? Prashant, Kiran Shukla, Amol, any doubts? You guys can please post your query. Further, I'm giving you 2 to 3 minutes time to please copy the explanation. So please copy, guys. Any doubts, guys? I request you to please copy the explanation. Yes, Tarun, Neha, any doubts? Gunjan? I hope your query is addressed now, Gunjan. Now I request you guys to please download the notes from the study material, sorry, the portal. I request you guys to please download the notes from the portal. I'll be discussing few examples, the small short examples now. So let's start with example number 2. I request you guys to please download the notes from the portal. I'm discussing example number 2 from my notes. I request you guys to please download the notes. I'm discussing example number 2. So example number 2, question relating to normal loss, that is the material is 1000 units at the rate 100. So total value is 1 lakh, labor cost is 1,50,000. Other expenses are 50,000, scrap value realized is 12,000. The normal loss is 10% of the input, prepare process account and calculate the cost of good units. So it's a very basic question. I'm discussing this question for better understanding of the concept of normal loss. Since there is a normal loss in units and the information, since the information relating to normal loss is given in the question, so we will be preparing units and amount column, both the sides. So to input, or we can say material, that is 1000 units and the total cost is 1 lakh. Further, labor cost is given 1,50,000. So to labor 1,50,000. Further, other expenses are there, that is 50,000. By normal loss. It is given in the question that the normal loss is 10% of the inputs. So it will be 100 units. And further, the scrap value is given, that is 12,000 rupees for these 100 units. So we can say the output that is to be transferred to the next process will be how many units? 900 units. And the cost per unit will be very simple. That is the total cost, that is 2 lakh minus 12,000 is the scrap value realized, that is 12,000, minus 1,000 units minus 100, that is my normal loss. We'll get the cost per unit. So I think it is 3 lakh. So the cost per unit will be 320. So the value will be 320 into 900, that is 2,88,000. We can use it as a balancing figure also in this question. So this will be 3 lakh. This will be. So this is how the normal loss will be dealt in process account, wherein it will be shown in the credit side of the process account, that is units in normal loss and the scrap value. Now, how to prepare normal loss account. It's very simple. We'll write to process account 100 units, 12,000 rupees. And these units are sold in the market. So by bank, 112,000. That's it. This is how the normal loss account will be prepared. If you guys have any conceptual queries as related to normal loss, then you guys can please post your queries. Let me check, Gunjan. I request you guys to please copy this explanation. I'm not sure the question is there in the study material. I request you guys to please download the notes from the portal. Let me check if it is there in the study material. It's not there in the study material. It's a general question I have taken. I request you guys to please download the notes from the portal. Any doubts, Shweta, Sakshi? Any doubts? Since we have sold these 100 units in the market, that's why I'm writing by bank account. These 100 units are sold in the market. That's why we are writing by bank account. Manohar. Anyone else having any doubts, queries? Okay, so let's take a break of 15 minutes. I'll be back after 15 minutes with with the concepts relating to abnormal loss and abnormal gain. So let's take a break of 15 minutes. Welcome back, guys. So there is a query from Manohar Yadav sir ji. In same example, what if the scrap was not sold? Then what we consider in credit side of normal loss account. So if the scrap is not sold, then will the amount column will be empty. So no need to prepare normal loss account. So without wasting time, now let's proceed further with the next part, that is abnormal loss. Now, what is abnormal loss? In simple terms, we can say the loss in excess of normal loss is abnormal loss. Or we can say the loss in excess of predetermined loss is abnormal loss. So when talking about abnormal loss, meaning the loss in excess of predetermined loss, or we can say normal loss. The loss in excess of predetermined loss is abnormal. Abnormal loss क्या होता है? The loss in excess of predetermined loss is abnormal loss. Now, this loss can be due to carelessness of workers or bad plant design or due to any abnormal reasons. It can be due to carelessness of workers, bad plant design, or any abnormal reasons. It can be either theft or accident or fire, anything. Now, this loss cannot be predicted by management in advance. So we can write one more point. Cannot be predicted in advance. Let me discuss this concept with the help of an example. So let's say I do manufacture potato chips from potatoes. I do procure these potatoes directly from farm. Now, during the course of transportation from farm to my factory gate, let's say one of my vehicle met an accident. The capacity of vehicle was, let's say, 35 tons. It means 35,000 kgs. और vehicle का accident हुआ और पूरा 35 tons का loss हो गया. So this loss is what we call it as abnormal loss, because management cannot predict in advance कि भाई accident होगा या something like that. If it is loss of potatoes due to loading and unloading, we can say it is normal loss. But yes, if the vehicle met an accident and there is a loss of 35 tons, or we can say 35,000 kgs, then this loss is what we call as abnormal loss. Now, when talking about the treatment of abnormal loss, when talking about the treatment of abnormal loss, one second. When talking about the treatment of abnormal loss, the value of abnormal loss will be equal to value of good units. The value of abnormal loss will be equal to value of good units. So the product cost will not be inflated. The value of abnormal loss will be equal to the value of good units. And what we will do is, it will be shown in credit side of process account. It will be shown in credit side of process account, and thereafter transferred to costing P&L. So the product cost will not be inflated because of abnormal loss, because हर साल हर एक fixed quantity में abnormal loss नहीं होता. So therefore the product cost will not be inflated with abnormal loss. Whatever the amount that is apportioned to the abnormal loss will be transferred to costing P&L. If you guys have any doubts in this part, then you guys can ask me. When talking about abnormal loss, the loss in excess of predetermined loss is abnormal loss, can be due to carelessness of worker, bad plant design, or any abnormal reasons, cannot be predicted in advance. Further, we can avoid abnormal loss if suitable measures are taken. Abnormal loss अगर हम चाहें तो avoid भी कर सकते हैं if the suitable measures are taken. When talking about the treatment, the value of abnormal loss will be equal to value of good units. Further, it will be shown in credit side of process account, and thereafter it will be transferred to costing P&L. Manish sir, I hope the screen is visible to all. Manish sir, are you there? I hope the board is visible to all. See, the name itself says abnormal loss. The name itself says that it is due to abnormal reasons. The product cost will not be inflated, Manohar. When talking about normal loss, yes, it is absorbed by good units. But when talking about abnormal loss, very simple, guys. The value of abnormal loss will be equal to the value of good units. And it will be shown in credit side of process account. And thereafter, it is transferred to costing P&L. Mamta, I request you to please refresh your internet connection. Yes, Mamta, when talking about normal loss, it is bound to happen. The management can predict well in advance. When talking about abnormal loss, it cannot be predicted. And yes, we can avoid abnormal loss if we take suitable measures and all. There is no concept of unavoidable abnormal loss, Manohar. I request you guys to please copy this explanation. I'll be discussing this with the help of a practical example. Don't worry, Nisha. Don't worry, Anmol. I'll be discussing this concept with the help of a practical example. Now, let's say I made an input of 10,000 units and my process cost is, let's say, 1,80,000. I made an input of 10,000 units and my process cost is 1,80,000 units. Now, management has predicted well in advance that the normal loss will be at the rate of 10% of inputs. Now, how much will be my expected output? See, guys, the input was 10,000 units. Further, the management predicted well in advance that the normal loss will be how much? 10% of the input. So it means what? My expected output will be how much? My expected output will be how much? That is 10,000 minus 1,000. That is 9,000 units will be my expected output. However, one second, guys. However, when the actual data was out, my actual production was only, my actual output, we can say actual output was only 8,800 units. When the actual figures were out, my actual output was only 8,800 units. I was predicting an output of 9,000 units. I was expecting an output of 9,000 units from the input of 10,000. However, when the actual data was out, my actual output was 8,800 units. It means what? 200 units is what? My abnormal loss. So these 200 units is what? My abnormal. I repeat again, guys, I have made an input of 10,000 units. The management has predicted well in advance that the loss will be 10% of inputs, that is 1,000 units. So therefore, my expected output was 9,000 units. However, my actual output was only 8,800 units. So it means this extra 200 units, that is the loss of extra 200 units, is what my abnormal. Further, the information is given in the question that the scrap sold at the rate rupees 4 per unit. It is given in the question that the scrap sold is at the rate rupees 4 per unit. Now we have to calculate the value of abnormal loss and the value of the output. So guys, again stick to the concept. Abnormal loss से प्रोडक्ट का कॉस्ट इन्फ्लेट नहीं होता है. I repeat again, abnormal loss से प्रोडक्ट का कॉस्ट इन्फ्लेट नहीं होता है. नॉर्मल लॉस से प्रोडक्ट का कॉस्ट इन्फ्लेट होता है. When talking about abnormal loss, it will be equal to the value of good units. So now the concept is very simple. When talking about the calculation of cost per unit, we'll apply the same rule because abnormal loss से प्रोडक्ट का कॉस्ट इन्फ्लेट नहीं होता. It has nothing to do with product cost. So herein, when talking about the calculation of cost per unit, 1,80,000 is my process cost minus my normal loss in units, that is 1,000 units, into the scrap value, that is rupees 4, that is 4,000, divided by my expected production, again 10,000 units minus 1,000, that is my normal loss. As discussed earlier also, the normal loss can inflate the cost of product. So herein the product cost will be inflated because of normal loss. So this will be 1,76,000 divided by 9,000 units. So the cost per unit will be, let's say, 19.55. The cost per unit will be 19.56. Again, very important, abnormal loss से product cost inflate नहीं होगा. So 19.55 will be the value of good units. So the value of actual output will be how much? 8,800 into 19.55. And when talking about the value of abnormal loss, again, the value will be same, that is 200 into 19.5. So ultimately, we are apportioning this cost of 1,76,000 to the actual output and the abnormal loss. So the value of abnormal loss will be equal to the value of good unit. Ultimately, करना क्या है? Very simple. Original cost minus scrap value, that is the process cost minus scrap value, the amount what we are getting, the net amount we are getting, we have to apportion it among the number of units that are transferred to the next process and the abnormal loss in unit. If you guys have any doubts in this concept, then you guys can please post your queries. Again, the process cost minus scrap value divided by expected production. अगर हम लोग इसे 8,800 से डिवाइड करते तो the product cost will be inflated. And in case of abnormal loss, the product cost is not to be inflated. The value of abnormal loss will be equal to the value of good units. Abnormal loss से product cost inflate नहीं होता है. If, see, there is a query, sir, Anmol Patwa, the expected output should be, it should be taken as 8,800. So this approach is incorrect. Agar aap 8,800 lete, it means what? You are giving the effect. Agar aap 8,800 lete, it means what? Abnormal loss is also contributing towards the product cost inflation, and that approach is incorrect. So what I want to say is, if it is normal loss, yes, the product cost will be inflated. But when talking about the abnormal loss, the product cost will not be inflated. Whatever the amount that is, whatever the value of abnormal loss is, it will be directly transferred to costing P&L rather than the value will be inflating the cost of the product. Nisha Kumari, hopefully your query is resolved. Anmol, hopefully your query is resolved. So when talking about abnormal loss, product cost inflate nahi hoga. The value of abnormal loss will be equal to the value of good unit. The amount will be transferred to the, it will be shown in credit side of process account, and thereafter it will be transferred to costing P&L. The units that are transferred to the next process, see, this will be transferred to next process, and this will transfer to costing P&L. I'll be discussing this question with the help of this concept with the help of a practical question also. Don't worry, Srinivasan. I request you guys to please copy this example. So the concept is very simple. Process cost minus scrap value realized on sale of normal loss divided by my expected output. That is the inputs minus normal loss. No, Manohar. Again, in simple terms, since in abnormal loss, the product cost is not inflated, so we will not cover the scrap value realized on sale of abnormal loss units. Let me discuss this concept with the help of an example. So hopefully after discussing the question, all your queries will be resolved. I request you guys to please download the note from the portal. I'm discussing example number 3 from my notes. Similar question I think is there in the study material. So I request you guys to please refer example number 3 from my notes. Similar question is there in the study material. So let's start with example number 3. A product passes through two process first and process second. Material issued to process first is 40,000 rupees and 5,000 units. The value is 40,000. The units are 5,000. The wages is 30,000. The manufacturing overhead are 27,000. The normal loss was as anticipated as 5% of the input. 4,550 units of output were produced and transferred out of process first. The scrap scrap has a realizable value of rupees 2 per unit. You are required to prepare process first account, the value of normal loss, abnormal gain, whatever it is, and the units that are transferred to next process. So let's start with this question. The similar question is there in the study material also. Herein, the material is 5,000 units and the value is 40,000 rupees. So to material 5,000 units and the value is 40,000 rupees. Further, the information is given as regards wages also. That is 30,000 and manufacturing overhead are 27,000. Now, by normal loss, that is 5% of input. So 5,000 into 5%. So this will be 250. And the scrap value is how much? 250 into 2, that is 500 rupees. Now, the units that are to be transferred to the next process is given in the question. That is 4,550. So 5,000 is my input and 250 is my normal loss. It means my estimated or expected production was how much? 4,750. However, when the actual figures were out, my actual production is only 4,550. It means there is a normal loss of how many units? Sorry, there is an abnormal loss of how many units? 200 units. I repeat again, my estimated production or expected production was 4,750 units. However, my actual production is only 4,550. It means what? There is an abnormal loss of 200 units. Now, ultimately, we have to calculate the value of abnormal loss and the value of units that are transferred to the next process. So this is the value we have to calculate. Again, the same concept, that is 40,000 plus 30,000 plus 27,000. that is 97,000 and 97,000. When talking about the calculation of cost per unit, 97,000 is the total cost of the process minus the scrap value realized on sale of normal loss unit divided by my expected output, that is 5,000 minus 250. So this will be 20.316. Now we can calculate the value of abnormal loss, that is 200 into 20.316. So this will be 4063 and this will be 92,437. Ultimately, what we are doing is we are distributing this 97,500 minus 500, that is 96,500 among these two. If you guys have any doubts in this part, you guys can please post your queries. Waiting for your queries, guys. Let me complete first, Mamta. Anyone else? Anyone having any doubts or queries in this part? You guys can please post your queries. Now let's proceed further with normal loss account. When talking about the preparation of normal loss account, to process first, if it is process first, 250 into 500, and by bank 250 and 500. Sorry. This is all what about normal loss account. When talking about abnormal loss account, again, to process account, that is 200 and 4063. We will assume that these units are also scrapped in the market. So by bank, just like the units that are scrapped, the units of the normal loss are scrapped, these units are also scrapped in the market at the same price, that is rupees 2, that is 400. So balance amount will be transferred to costing P&L. That is 4063 minus 400. So 3663. This amount is to be transferred directly to the costing P&L. We will assuming these units are sold in market similar to normal loss. So this is the way to solve the question. If you guys have any doubts, you guys can please post your queries. I request you guys to please copy this explanation. I think in study material, the abnormal loss account is not given. So I request you guys to please copy the explanation. I hope Mamta and Manohar, your queries are resolved. Srinivasan, any other doubts? Amol Patwa, any other doubts, queries? See, the concept is very simple. The process cost minus scrap value of normal loss divided by my expected output, because expected output is what? The inputs minus normal loss. And as I said, that the value of normal loss will be equal to the sorry guys, when talking about the calculation of cost per unit, it is process cost minus the scrap value that is realized on sale of normal loss divided by my expected output. Expected output means what? Inputs minus normal loss. As discussed also, that no, I mean, if there is any normal loss, the product cost will be inflated. The value of normal loss will be absorbed by the remaining units, that is the good units. When talking about abnormal loss, very simple, guys. The value of abnormal loss will be equal to the value of good units, and it will be shown in credit side of process account, and thereafter it is to be transferred to costing P&L. I request you guys to please copy normal and abnormal loss account and the solution. No, 3663 will not be a part of our product cost. It will be transferred to costing P&L. This is the balancing figure, and it is transferred to costing P&L because this is abnormal loss. It is due to abnormal reasons. So how can you inflate the product cost? So it has nothing to do with product cost. ममता यादव सर, मुझे एक बार अकाउंट हिंदी में समझा दीजिए. So Mamta, in simple terms, 200 and 4063 is the value of abnormal loss. हम लोग ये अज्यूम करेंगे कि ये 200 यूनिट्स जस्ट लाइक दीज 250 यूनिट्स हमने मार्केट में सेल किया. सो जैसे ये हमने 250 यूनिट्स मार्केट में सेल किया एट द रेट 2, सिमिलरली हम लोग ये 200 यूनिट्स मार्केट में सेल करेंगे एट द रेट 2. सो हम लोगों को 400 रुपीज मिलेगा. विल बी गेटिंग 400 रुपीज. सो 4063 इज द वैल्यू ऑफ abnormal लॉस. उसमें से हम लोग 400 अगर माइनस कर देंगे, सो नेट लॉस इज हाउ मच? 3663. It will be transferred to costing P&L. Anmol Patwa, hopefully your query is resolved. Mamta, Srinivasan, Nisha Kumari, any doubts? Ajay Chauhan, Sakshi, any doubts? Shweta Maruti, any doubts? Anmol and Mamta, hopefully your query is resolved. Yes, Mamta. Yes, Srinivasan. Anyone else having any doubts or queries, you guys can please post. Before starting with the full-fledged question, I want every student of mine to be thorough with the concept that why we are doing what we are doing. So whatever the queries you have by any, whatever the queries you have, you guys can please post your query. This chapter is very easy if you stick to the concepts. So follow the concepts, follow the steps. This chapter is, it's like free marks if the examiner asks the question in exam. So done, guys, with the abnormal loss. So we are done with normal loss. Yes, Mamta. They are actually sold in the market, Anmol. Now let's start with the next part, that is abnormal gain. Now, when talking about abnormal gain, see, when the actual production exceeds the expected production, we call it as abnormal gain. In the previous question, we were expecting a production of, I think it was, in the previous question, we were expecting a production of 4750 units, but my actual output was only 4550. It means my actual production was less than my expected production. So we call it as abnormal loss. But what if in case, if the actual production exceeds the expected production? Let's say I made an input of 10,000 units. My normal loss is at the rate 10% of input, let's say 1000 units. So my expected output will be how much? Very simple, 9,000. Now let's take a situation wherein if my actual output is 9,300 units. My actual output is 9,300 units. It means what? 300 units. जो extra आया output, we call it as abnormal gain. We were expecting an output of 9,000 units, but हुआ क्या? Actual production was 9,300 units. That is 300 much more than what we expected. So these 300 units are what? My abnormal gain. Now, when talking about abnormal gain, it can be due to efficiency of workers, or it can be due to wrong estimation of expected output. It can be due to efficiency of workers, or it can be due to wrong estimation of expected output. Now, when talking about the treatment of abnormal gain, see, abnormal loss, what we used to do, we used to show in credit side of process account, and thereafter it was transferred to costing P&L. But when talking about abnormal gain, it will be shown in debit side of process account, and again it will be transferred to costing P&L. प्रोडक्ट कॉस्ट ना तो इंक्रीज होगा ना डिक्रीज होगा बिकॉज ऑफ एबनॉर्मल लॉस और एबनॉर्मल गेन. So product cost will remain unchanged. That is, the cost per unit will remain unchanged, whether it is abnormal loss or abnormal gain. I repeat again in Hindi for the students who are finding it a bit difficult to understand English, कि product cost हमेशा same होगा. That is the process cost minus the scrap value realized on sale of normal loss divided by my expected output. When talking about expected output, what is expected output? Input minus normal loss. So the product cost will remain unchanged if it is abnormal loss or abnormal gain. So when talking about the treatment of abnormal gain, it will be shown in debit side of process account, and thereafter it will be transferred to costing P&L. Yes, we can say it may be due to wrong estimation of normal loss, or another term what we can use it as, that it's a saving in normal loss. It's a saving in normal loss. Actually, normal loss hua kitna? We were predicting a normal loss of 1000 units. However, my net units that are sold in the market is only 700 units. Because 300 units ka loss hua hi nahi. It's an abnormal gain. So sharing the screen for your reference. When talking about abnormal gain, the meaning that when the actual production exceeds the expected figures, it is abnormal gain. It arises due to overestimation of process loss, we can say overestimation of normal loss, or improvement in the work efficiency of worker, or use of better technology in production, etc. When talking about the treatment, it will be shown in debit side of process account, and thereafter it is transferred to costing P&L. If you guys have any queries in this part, you guys can please post, else we'll discuss one question on abnormal gain. We'll start with the question on abnormal gain. Yes, Harish, it can be due to wrong estimation of normal loss. So let's start with the same example, that is example number 3 of my notes. The second part also answer if the output is 4850 units. So let's start. The second part of example number 3. We have to prepare process account. To material, it is 5,000 units and the value is 40,000. To labor, it is 30,000. To manufacturing overhead, it is 27,000. By normal loss, it is 5% of the input, so it is 250 and 5. When talking about my final output that is to be transferred to process second, see in this situation, it is given in the question that also answer if the output is 4850. Now we have to calculate the value. Now see guys, in this question, we were predicting an output of 4750 units. That is 5,000 minus 250 normal loss. What was my expected output? 4750 units. However, when the actual figures were out, my actual output is how much? 4850. That is 100 units more than what I expected. So these 100 units are what? My abnormal gain. So now these two values need to be calculated. Again, the product cost will remain unchanged. The same way we will calculate the product cost, that is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is calculation of cost per unit. That is 97,000 minus 500 divided by my expected output, that is 4750. That is 5,000 minus 250. We'll get the cost per unit. That is 96,500 divided by 4750. So 20.316. So the value of units that are transferred to the next process will be how much? Into 4850. So this will be this will be 2032. Again, we are distributing 96,500 in the ratio 4850 is 200. That's it. We are distributing this 96,500 in the ratio of 4850 is 200. If you guys have any doubts in this part, you guys can please post your query. Yes, we can. We have to adjust the abnormal gain from the normal loss. I'll be discussing this with the help of abnormal gain account. It was to we will not consider any sort of abnormal loss or gain while fixing up the cost. Any sort of abnormal loss or abnormal gain will not be considered while fixing up the cost or fixing up the price. Now let's start with normal loss account and abnormal gain account. Normal loss two process account. $250 and $500. Abnormal gain by process account 100 and 203. Now guys, when talking about abnormal gain, we can also say that it is a saving in normal loss. See, we predicted a loss of 250 units. However, there is an abnormal gain of 100 units. It means what? Only 150 units are sold in the market. I repeat again, guys, very important. We were predicting and we were estimating a loss of 250 units. However, there is an abnormal gain of 100 units. It means the units that are actually sold in the market is only 150 units. Because, see, my normal loss is 250 units. Of this, the abnormal gain is 100 units. It means the units that are actually sold in the market is only 150 units at the rate 2 rupees per unit, that is 300. So these 100 units, the balance will be how much? 200. So in short, what is abnormal gain? We can say it is the saving in the normal loss. What is abnormal gain? In other words, we can say that is what is abnormal gain? It is saving in normal loss. However, it will not affect the product cost or cost per unit. Because आज abnormal gain हुआ है, कल शायद हो नहीं हो, we are not sure. That's why. So when talking about abnormal gain, we will write two normal loss, 100 and 200, and balance will be transferred to costing P&L. That is 1832. If you guys have any doubts in this part, you guys can please post your queries. I request you guys to please copy the statement. Yes, Mamta, Harish, Srinivasan, Manohar, Anmol, Ajay. Any doubts? Sakshi, Shweta, Gunjan, any doubts? Yes, Mamta, Harish, any doubts? Anmol, very important guys. काफी स्टूडेंट्स ये पार्ट में मिस्टेक करते हैं. This abnormal gain and normal loss account. So if you guys have any queries, you guys can please post your queries. Okay, so I've got a query from Mamta. Sir, abnormal gain 100 units भी sale हुआ है. No, Mamta. See, when talking about the units that are scrapped, see, there is a loss of 250 units, what we predicted. But the units that are actually sold is only 150 units. Balance are adjusted against abnormal gain. 100 units sale nahi hua hai. These 100 units are adjusted against abnormal gain. Why? Because see, we were predicting a loss of 250 units. However, there is a saving of loss of 100 units. It means the units that are actually scrapped in the market is only 150 units. So the units that are scrapped and sold in the market is only 150 units. The balance units are adjusted against abnormal gain. So this is all what about abnormal gains. So today we have discussed the meaning of process costing. I mean, where we do apply this process costing. Further, we discussed the format, that is the basic format. Thereafter, we discussed normal gain, abnormal loss, and abnormal gain, along with how we will be presenting all these items in process account. Further, we discussed these accounts also, how to prepare normal loss, abnormal gain account. I hope you guys are thorough with the concept. So I request you guys to revise what I have discussed till now, because there are two more sessions in process costing and I'll be discussing many practical questions in these sessions. So for the better understanding of the remaining practical part, you need to be thorough with these concepts. So I request you guys to please do revise what I have taught you in today's session. In the next session, we'll start with a full-fledged question wherein in one question only you will find all the 3 points, that is normal loss, and abnormal gain. Thereafter, we'll start with the remaining part of the chapter. So that's it for the day. Thank you so much, guys, for your time and patience. Again, I request you guys to please revise what I have discussed in today's session. And the next session, I'm not getting Gunjan what you are saying. I'm not getting Gunjan. So the next class is tomorrow morning. So thank you so much, guys. Do revise what I have discussed and enjoy your day. God bless you guys. Thank you so much. Sir, I'm done.